Let's get it in. You do this back, made back, proof is back. Tell the whole world the truth is back.
Hi, I'm Billy Mays.
Where my hustlers, where my boosters at? I don't care what you do for stack. I know the world glued you back to the wall. You gotta run through that. I've been through that, been shot at, shoot that. Gotta keep a peace like a Buddhist. I ain't a new jack, nobody gon' Wesley snipe me. It's less than likely that I bring Jedi Knight. The more space I get, the better I write. Oh, never I write.
I've got Jim Barnett with me, and I've got Ross Long on Skype, and we are live as live can get here on Salina Cable Television, Channel 21, salinatv.org. I want to start, since you were last on, Jim. By the way, we have got a lot of positive feedback from folks since your last appearance.
Good.
About how they liked your common sense ideas. They like that you talk to them like a normal person, not a politician.
Good.
So I figured you'd appreciate that.
Thank you.
Ross, you were unable to join us that evening. You're going to be joining us here for the first 30 minutes of the show. Let's talk a little bit about what you're looking for in a governor. And you've talked to. He was on with Carl Brewer. He was on when we talked about some of the other folks, and we even interviewed a gentleman who was thinking about running for governor, and then I don't know if he actually decided to run for governor or hasn't run for governor yet. But Ross, with knowing a little bit about Jim and knowing a little bit about his background, being a physician and all these things, and some of the things that he's talked about with, he wants to do tourism, he wants to, keep young people in the state of Kansas and agriculture and all these things. What are some questions you have? Because I know our time is limited with you, my friend.
Yes, Mr. Barnett. Yes, it's our doctor, I should say.
Just Jim.
Yes, it's a pleasure to meet you tonight. I'm just wondering, yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, if you're going to have a healthy state economy, you need good economic development. So where are we? Right next door here in Colorado, we have pretty much the #1 most healthy economy, and just right across the way we have Kansas, which is lingering in the bottom 40s of healthy economies of the union that way. So what can we do to change that? I always hope the best for Kansas, and I just hate to see it, what's happening now, with all your best and brightest leaving the state once they hit 18.
Right. Well, I'm going to give you 4 key elements of what I think the state needs to do, and we'll talk about them in detail, as much detail as you want to. But first of all, I took this challenge of traveling the state, talking with people, listening to people for a year, asking the question, what do we need to do as a state to grow business? Yeah. And I found chambers of commerce to be really rich with people who would share ideas. And here's what they said businessmen and women want. They want workforce development, infrastructure like highways. They need an education system where their families will want to come to the state and be well educated. They want healthcare access available and good quality healthcare. They want quality of life measures where people want to come and stay in Kansas. So those are the basics that I think we have to get right first. Now what Kansas did under Governor Brownback is, and Lieutenant Governor Collier, is we put all our eggs in this basket of zeroing out taxes for 300,000 and plus, and we let all the rest go. So we let all the basics go. Now we just learned from the Supreme Court that we're not adequately funding schools. And that's a whole nother issue we can talk about. But the next governor has to get the basics right. We have to get the workforce trained, have to have that training available. We have to have infrastructure, restoring KDOT. We have to make sure our education system is up to speed and funded equitably, adequately. And we need to have health care accessible. So that's the first thing the governor needs to do, is get those things right. The second thing is that Kansas is very different regionally. So central Kansas is different than southwest Kansas, is different than southeast Kansas, is different than Johnson County. The last time Kansas approached economic development on a regional basis was with Governor Bill Graves and Lieutenant Governor Gary Scherer. It's been that long, and that's an appropriate name. Those are appropriate names to discuss here in Salina. So we have to realize it's regionally different, and that's how I'm going to approach economic development. The third thing is this. We used to think the state is just agriculture, oil, and aviation. That is not true.
Yep.
And I have a slide that shows high-performing industries in our state. There are multiple high-performing industries, and if that slide can be shown now.
Yeah, we'll put that up for television viewers and for folks watching us on Access TV. Now, give us your thoughts on this, because you've got advanced manufacturing on here. You've got something that Ross has discussed with many of the other governor candidates, agriculture and livestock. You've got a little bit of everything. Hit some of the points here, my friend.
Sure. Well, cybersecurity, a huge issue that our nation faces. We all personally face that with things like Equifax now too. Healthcare is huge across the state. IT, infrastructure, technology, logistics and transportation. Military, huge to the Flint Hills region, especially medical research, plant and animal, veterinary and science, sports and entertainment. No one in the world builds a new sports complex without coming to Kansas City, where they know how to do it. Tourism is huge. I mean, that's an economic engine we've left parked in the garage. And there's a lot to grow in the state from all of these areas. So what I want to do is I want to look at these high-performing industries on a regional basis, and if we might turn to the next slide.
Yes, this was something when we were getting ready to put the television show together this evening. This graph that you've got here that has HPI task force in the middle, and then all these things around it. Kind of spotlight some of these.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think the most important appointment I will make as governor is the Secretary of Commerce. And we need a really good Secretary of Commerce that gets this and in a program that's well funded. But with the Secretary of Commerce and as governor, I want to go around regionally and bring together those individuals, those businessmen and women in those high-performing industries who are in the center of all of this. It's not government in the middle, it's private industry, private men and women with their capital and with their entrepreneurial spirit. And then around that is where government has a role to play. Workforce. We have 45,000 at least unfilled jobs in this state right now. We have a company in Kansas City that sends out 3,000 jobs a year to Bangalore, India, because we don't have the trained workforce here. High-paying jobs. Workforce development. New companies, new business that come, they need to be able to have their workers trained so they can fill those jobs. We have the infrastructure with higher ed, with community colleges, with technical colleges, but what we've been doing is stripping away funding. We need to grow that, and as governor, that needs to be programmatic across the state. Infrastructure is huge. Highways, for example, we've robbed KDOT, so we're now going to be bonding. We're going to be bonding money just to maintain highways with interest-only payments for 20 years. So think about that. That's how bad our budget has gotten, but we've got to restore infrastructure in our state. Education, we talked about that. Healthcare, I support Medicaid expansion for the reason that we need to keep hospitals open. Think of Independence, Kansas, a community of 9,000 people. They lost their hospital. Think of how that will be a struggle to attract new business. It's like losing your school. Young professionals in marketing. We have to look at how we can make Kansas an attractive state for young people to come and live and work there and raise their families. And part of that's marketing. I mentioned the Department of Commerce, and the last thing I have on this graphic is metrics. We usually think about metrics as, how many jobs do you create, what salaries are they? For me, the metrics will be this. I want to look at business in the eye and ask them, what is it you need? And then that's what we need to produce. As a state, we need to be geared up, primed, ready to go to grow the state's economy.
Now Ross, listening to all this and seeing some of these graphics and just listening to the doctor here, I know you have some questions.
I would ask, firstly, say we get an Obamacare light type of deal where basically the federal government just gives money to the states. Well, it's going to be up to, the state legislator and their governor to figure out how they're going to do the medicine in Kansas that way. So as a doctor, hopefully you can shed some light on, make me confident that a vote for you would be the right one, at least on health care.
Sure. Well, so what we're talking about, Ross, would be block grants for Medicaid is what
Yes.
What we're really discussing, and that is a possibility with Congress and President Trump. Now, that is why I think the next governor of Kansas needs to have a deep understanding of health care and a passion for healthcare reform and innovation.
Yeah.
So I welcome the opportunity, if that's what we're given, to do that. And here's what I would do, Ross, because what we do now is we pay for volume of services. We pay for high-tech, high-cost procedures. We pay for keeping people in a hospital bed for $2,000+ a day. We don't pay for keeping people well and out of the hospital. So what I will want to do is I want to start paying for value, not volume. It's called value-based purchasing. And this is something that is coming down the pike, because in America right now we pay more for Medicare and Medicaid than Social Security.
Yep.
The federal government knows we don't have the money to sustain this, so the switch has to flip. And so we need to flip that switch and start paying for keeping people healthy and keeping people well. That's where we really make the major savings in healthcare. Mayo Clinic gets this. Mayo Clinic is now partnering with their community hospitals around their region, because they know they can't keep people in Mayo forever. They've got to get them in and get them out, and then back to the community hospitals with 24/7 e-medicine and telemedicine, which needs to be paid for. That's the kind of innovation that I would want to bring to Kansas, Ross.
That's an excellent answer, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. With healthcare being so high for me, over $500 a month, I just can't afford that. So I had to get off of healthcare, and my healthcare dollar has to go for me being healthy. I mean, I just have to exercise and do things, because I'm scared to death if I get sick that way. I already have the problem, what if I get injured or something? There's not much I can do there, but there is something I can do now, and I'm motivated now to stay as healthy as I can as a 53-year-old man. But go ahead there, Jiggy. I think you had the next question there.
You hear stories like this from not just people like Ross. You hear from folks who are like, well, I just have to do without. Or I just or I have healthcare coverage, but it's kind of crummy healthcare coverage. As governor, what would be some of the steps that you would, besides all the ones that you've mentioned, what would be sort of, I guess, the beginning of your beginning act to try to get that put into motion?
Sure. So we have to sort of look short-term and long-term. So look through the microscope and the telescope. Yeah. First of all, we have so many Kansans who are working now but can't afford health insurance.
Yeah.
This is why I support Medicaid expansion. And the state of Kansas has let over $2 billion of our tax money leave the state, and hospitals are suffering now. And one has closed. We almost lost a hospital in Topeka.
Yep.
There are other hospitals about to close. But again, if a community loses that hospital, they may well be losing their community. So I want to help support them, and I support Medicaid expansion for the economic reasons we can talk about, but even more so, I support Medicaid expansion for the human reasons, humanitarian reasons. So people put off going to get health care.
And that's the thing that I like about what you're talking about. It seems like that and it's not just the Republicans in Kansas, but I've noticed that Republicans nationwide, they don't really seem to have a plan. You've got a plan. Why don't they have a plan? If you've been able, as a medical doctor and running for governor, you've been able to put something together. Why can't we do something like that nationally?
Well, that's a great question. I don't understand that myself. I mean, I wouldn't be running for governor if I didn't have reasonable suggestions and plans for us to deal with the economy, to deal with healthcare, to deal with tourism, to deal with education, to deal with agriculture needs, et cetera. So I feel it's incumbent upon me. I hope Kansas is ready to elect a pragmatic, problem-solving governor. And I hope the state of Kansas is 10 years ahead of the rest of the nation. And nationally, we've seen such partisan fighting, partisan
Yes.
divide, and nobody can govern. Nobody solves anything, and just saying no is not enough. So I'm hoping the state is ready to elect that kind of governor, and that's why I decided to run. But we'll see. But I hope Kansas leads the nation in that regard.
Now, Ross, in the limited time that we have you here on Skype, do you have any thoughts or anything that has sparked within the last 5 to 10 minutes here discussing here with the doctor?
Well, I couldn't agree with him more. So far as it would be. You just can't have a state where your nearest hospital is 150 miles away. Yes, save all of them as much as you possibly can, because that goes to the quality of life. I mean, people are not motivated to stay there. I would also say Kansas needs, a kick in the butt on the tourism end of things. It needs to be we don't have to have amusement parks every 3 blocks or anything, but your community, there needs to be things to do other than just twiddling your thumbs or doing whatever on the internet.
How do you, based upon what Ross is saying there, one of your big deals is tourism.
Yes.
What are you looking, and it doesn't have to be a day one issue, because I know that when it all comes down to it and you eventually get elected, you're going to have a heck of a lot on your plate on day one. Maybe this is a day 2 thing.
Well, tourism is very important. It's an economic engine in Kansas that we've left parked in the garage.
Yeah.
We haven't supported it. We haven't funded it. Even without any funding, it's one of the fastest growing segments of our economy, though.
Yeah.
I just got married Saturday night.
Well,
Saturday afternoon
congratulations.
in the Flint Hills. We had guests from 17 states and 3 countries. We billed it as a destination wedding, and they loved it. The panoramic view of the Flint Hills, the cattle, the sunsets, the skies, they just love the state. Now, we've traveled the state for a year, and there are so many neat things. I'll give you an example. Out in western Kansas, there's a place called Little Jerusalem. It's our version of the Badlands. We have Badlands in Kansas, but it's been on private property. That's going to be opened up by the Nature Conservancy, and that needs to be marketed. We ought to be building, in my opinion, in the eastern part of the state, something like a U.S. national whitewater, which is whitewater rafting. We don't have to go to Colorado to do whitewater rafting.
And Ross, I've seen Ross on social media. He has done some whitewater rafting.
All right. So there are so many neat places around, but as governor, I want to support that and promote it. And I will come out with a 5-step plan. This will be 5 steps.
Okay.
Next week, I'll tell you. I'll have it out to you.
Now, Ross, listening to all this, has this sparked your interest a little bit? Because
oh yes, I've always wanted to do, and I still want to do, a documentary on the Flint Hills region. Kind of what I'd already have a title for it, called "Last of the Great American Prairies," because that's what it is, and it's Kansas's thing. It's impossible to plow that area, so there's no way to develop it. It is truly the last of the great American prairies. And I can just imagine the great wedding that you had with around the Tallgrass Prairie. I know exactly what you're talking about. Oh, yes, I want to get a couple of good drones and just make the best documentary I can. There's been a couple others that have been made, but yes, Kansas has so much to give. I mean, there's so much history, so much rich 150-year-old history there in Kansas that the Old West is there. The great stories, this guy was, hung here because he was a cattle rustler or whatever. All those little markers along the roads. It's just fascinating. And yes, there's just so much potential there in the tourism area. I couldn't agree more. I don't know what the question is, but so help me out, James.
Well, Jim, this whole thing of being you've laid out some common sense ways here, basically, of putting this all together. One of the things that I hear about, and I start to hear more about this more and more all the time in Kansas, and it sort of relates to agriculture, is hemp. It seems like there's a lot of people that are, I guess, ringing that bell, if you want to say, about hemp. And I know that Ross, we've had a couple episodes of Live from Salina where he's asked a few folks about hemp, and people don't seem to, either they don't understand it or they don't want to understand it. But I know on the last show, you are very knowledgeable about hemp and how it's a good resource and everything. Go ahead. And
Sure. Well, of course, hemp was grown in Kansas at one time. It's an agricultural product with multiple uses, including for fabric. But I'm going to lump it in together because one of our problems in Kansas is we haven't diversified our crops. We're really good at growing corn and soybeans and wheat. We're so good at it that the price just goes down and down and down as we produce more and more bushels. And it's sort of a losing proposition, but we can grow other crops. Cotton is a great crop, for instance. We are seeing more and more cotton grown in Kansas. The line you can grow it is moving up because the climate's changing. There are 4 cotton gins. It was a thrill to go through one in Anthony. It's just an amazing experience to go through a cotton gin down there. It's been very profitable for the past 5 years. Canola, dry beans, lentils, peas. So we should be growing the type of crops we can raise in Kansas, plus looking at those that need less water. Now, hemp is one of those products, and I want to, as governor, support all of those measures to diversify our crops, and we'll get better prices. We'll have better year after year for agriculture. And then we want to do value-added things like we grow sorghum or Milo in Kansas. Out in western Kansas near Scott City, they pop Milo. It goes in health bars. Milo is gluten-free. They sell that to Kellogg and General Mills. And that's very profitable. So we want to not only raise these products, but we want to look at how can we make a value-added product too and grow this state's economy, bring higher-paying jobs, bring people back to Kansas.
Now, Ross.
Absolutely. Let me just jump in here.
Yes.
You're the first Republican that even is knowledgeable about hemp. And yes, hemp is one of the greatest crops to rotate with other crops like cotton. So you're not burning out the soil. And yes, hemp is great for, you don't have to suck water out of the Aqualala aquifer to grow a good crop of it. And there's so many, I mean, they're estimating some 10,000 usages for hemp. And I'm not even talking the medical field that now they're finding low THC marijuana that is high in this CBD oil. There's several different kinds of hemp. There's more fibrous hemp, and then there's more oil-based hemp that will produce a lot of oil that tends to be more in the medical world of things. But it's almost a miracle cure that they're finding. And no, it's not. Doesn't have anything to do about getting stoners high. Yes, you know this. Now, Colorado has the most acreage, yet it's still pretty much considered experimental acreage. I mean, I just see the potential for Kansas, and it's, all over the state for it to be grown there. There's no area that would be inappropriate that you could not grow it there, I would not think. Yes, I just, and all you would have to do is just deregulate it, essentially, and let farmers go for it, in my opinion, because I understand it doesn't take special equipment to basically harvest it and so forth.
Well, and something Ross has brought up on some of our past episodes of Live from Salina is that it grows in Kansas on its own. There have been farmers that have tried to stop it from growing, and they have not had a lot of success. What do you make of sort of what Ross was saying with kind of the deregulation of it and encouraging people to grow it? And
we would have to request that at the federal level, which could be done, and I would encourage us to do that, yes. Yeah. So I think agriculture, looking at other crops, multiple crops, makes a lot of sense for our state, and particularly looking long-term at water issues for Kansas, which it's not just western Kansas where that's an issue, but water water quality, water quantity as well, important issues for the next governor to deal with. Workforce issues too, in terms of the issue of immigrant labor,
yes.
which we want to be legal, of course. But without immigrant labor in Kansas, we're in trouble, and we need to be very careful who we elect as our next governor, that we don't go down the wrong path on that as well, because that will kill the state if we do that.
Now, Ross, I know that we don't have a lot of time with you on Skype. Do you have anything else to cover with the doctor here before we let you go for this evening?
I'm going to have to make it, my final contribution here right now. But yes, I'm just really liking what I'm hearing from you. I mean, you seem to be on the right, source of Republican that I like, more conservative, certainly more libertarian, willing to try things, not, because I think you realize that what Kansas is doing now is just simply not working.
Yeah.
That's right.
I don't know the magic button to press, but something really needs to be done. Innovation, yes, that's where it's at. I mean, we need to start thinking in different realms and get the state out of its slump, because there's a way out of this problem, I am confident.
I believe there is too.
Well, Ross, I appreciate you making time for us this evening. Thanks for coming on, my friend.
Yes, sir. So long to you, and best of luck to you. I hope we talk to you several times again before next November.
Thank you,
Yes.
Ross. Thank you.
Yes.
Now, Jim, we've got a slide back there that we'll have our TV production put up. Your 4 keys to Kansas economic development. Let's go through these step by step, and just really drill these so the folks that are watching us live
Sure.
can get all the information that they can, and how it separates you from some of the other folks out there.
Sure. Let's start with the slide that says the 4 keys, and
Yeah.
thank you. Getting the basics right. Again, to get the basics right, what businessmen and businesswomen have told me over and over again, what they want. They need workforce training, infrastructure, education, health care for their families, and quality of life issues. The next governor has to go to work day one on all of those issues. Now, that is going to take a long time. We got into a terrible mess at the state. Our budget is awful. And I don't know that Kansans really understand how bad it got, but we just saw the legislature pass a $1.2 billion tax increase, and that's just to try to fill the hole. That's not for doing anything more. So the next governor is going to need time to do that. I have said this before, I'll say it again tonight. I think the next governor of Kansas may be a one-term governor because there's so many difficult decisions to make. I'm okay with that. But I think most Kansans get it, and it's going to take probably 10 years to get out of the hole we're in. The next thing, regional development, recognizing that there's
control.
Regional, we're different regionally in terms of how we grow our economy, what our assets are different regionally. But 95% of economic growth is local. And so the next governor has to respect that the work is best done in Salina, in Scott City, in Olathe. It's not the governor or the government coming in. We're on the outside of this. And I'll tell you a classic example of where that goes wrong is with Tonganoxie and the Tyson chicken plant.
Yes.
That was done in secret. The community was not involved. And when they found out, they erupted. And erupted in a way that surprised Tyson. And unfortunately, that gives Kansas yet another black eye where we have a business wanting to come. And we say no.
Like, no.
But that's where local control comes in so importantly.
Well, and not to sidetrack from that, but there are other areas that are bidding on that plant. One of them being in Reno County. They want to have that come there. But one of the problems that I've heard, which you explained earlier on one of the other slides, was the fact that you're going to have immigrant workforce come in, and you want to have the right immigrant workforce. And that's one of the things that I hear about with the Tyson plant. Is that, well, this is going to bring a lot of illegal labor and they're going to tear things up and all these things. How do you get the business in to bring the jobs, but how do you set it up to where you've got the right people being employed, but at the same time, you want to have local control and you want to have the regions do their own thing? To me, that's just a huge mess. How do you fix that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, first of all, that's why it has to be a community effort. The community has to be engaged and involved. They have to be involved in a conversation to be able to express themselves if they want that or not, or to really understand what the issues are. I want to go back and say one thing. When we're talking about immigrant labor, this is a state and a nation where we live by the rule of law.
Yes.
And so we want to be legal immigrant labor, of course. How do you go about that? I think you go look at a city like Garden City. Garden City is booming.
Yep.
They embrace this, and they realize that their livelihood depended upon it as well. And what they have seen is that it's grown business. The immigrant workforce became a job creator, an economy creator.
Yep.
And when you really think about it, it's not just Garden City. When we think about our immigrant workforce, it's statewide. It's in Seward County, it's in Johnson County. And we have to figure out how to go forward with the appropriate legal avenues for that kind of labor to be here in this state, because it will help us all grow. And quite honestly, we're very dependent upon it right now.
Now, one of the other sections on this 4 Keys to Kansas Development is identify and convene high-performing industries. What is your definition of that, and how do we do that?
Yes. Well, I think you could go to your Chamber of Commerce in Salina, Kansas here, or you could go to the Chamber of Commerce in Manhattan, or you could go to the Chamber of Commerce in Lenexa, Kansas, and they can identify them for you quickly. They can not only tell you what those industries are that are performing well now, they can tell you the ones that have potential to grow as well. So it's not only high performing, but high potential. They can also tell you the names of the men and women who are involved, the presidents, the chief people that run those businesses. We get them together. And that's what I mean by convening that high performance industry task force for that individual group of businesses, and ask, how can we grow more? What do you need to grow more? Is it workforce? What workforce? What infrastructure do you need? What do we need to train? And that's how we go about it. And I think Kansas could do so much better if we did that. Again, regionally based, regionally approached, local control. But I'll tell you what, there are people in Johnson County who want me to put them on a bus and bring them out west. And I think there's a good reason, because there's money to be made out west. They have ideas of how they could invest in parts of western Kansas. Western Kansas has ideas of how they could use that. And as governor, what I'd like to do is get a busload of people together and bring them out to a city, know they're coming, and let's talk. I think we could grow this.
That would be amazing.
I think we could grow this state's economy a lot. I also, if I may, I want to talk about the other point that we haven't touched on tonight, called enterprising academics. Now, when I was here last time, I told you I thought of this original term for our campaign, the theme of our campaign of One Kansas. Listening to people across the state, we heard the word one, the word unite, the words work together. And I said to Rosie, the theme of our campaign is going to be One Kansas. Okay, I'm going to claim that term. I'm going to claim this term of enterprising academics. I was listening to people talk about the struggles they have in getting the workforce they need, of getting educators to listen to businessmen and women about the kind of workforce they need trained. And it came to me that what we need in Kansas is enterprising academics. Getting business and education at the table to train that workforce we need to bring those high-paying jobs and bring more business and industry to the state. Now, I've Googled this. I can't find anybody that's got this term on Google, enterprising academics. So I'm claiming this term. Now, if you find somebody else, you can give it to them. But across the state, people get this, and they're doing that now. And we've got to make that programmatic across the state, where the governor makes that a priority, that we're training for careers. So when kids get out of school, they can get a job.
And see, this is I have, and I don't know why I thought of this, but the way that you're talking, I have a cousin who is getting ready to enroll and become a CNA, and when they do, I've noticed with CNAs and CMAs, if you sign up with like a healthcare facility, like a retirement home or what have you, they will pay for your education.
There you go.
Okay, how come more businesses can't do that? And like you were saying, how, training them in school, giving them the proper tools in school, high school, middle school, so that eventually they can get out in the workforce and go to college and get that degree and all these things. Where did we, I guess, get off on the wrong foot with that whole thing?
Well, first of all, we haven't had a governor that thought of it and will promote it. I think back in the 1990s, we made a mistake by saying everyone should go to college. And college is great. I was so blessed to be able to go from a small school to Emporia State University and work my way through and become a physician. I would have been a farmer, but I have asthma and hay fever, okay? Now, college is not for everyone. Think of the students who have a college degree, $100,000 of debt, and they can't get a job. So we've focused on credits and so many credit hours and degrees. What we need to focus on are careers. And it's starting to happen in certain areas of the state. They're starting to do that now. And we need to ramp that up. And as governor, I want to ramp that up on steroids, so that we are looking with young people and their families and asking the question, what kind of career do you want when you get out of school? So that we're looking at pathways now for them to go that way. Not saying they can't change, they can change, and not saying that they have to go to community college or can't or whatever. But we need to focus on careers. That's what, as governor, I want to do. And that will also help us eventually, I think, get us out of court and school funding, and also help us have the money to pay for highways and schools and healthcare, all the things we need, is to grow that economy with enterprising academics.
Now, while we're sitting here, if people have just tuned in live or they're watching us on delay, if people want to get more information on you online, how do they do that? What's your website?
Sure, it's barnettforkansas.com, BARNETTFOR, Kansas, spelled out, .com. And please look, please check us out. Actually, Facebook has all kinds of stuff on it, policies. And honestly, I didn't do Facebook or I didn't tweet until this campaign, okay? So, but it's fun. There's a whole different world out there with Facebook. But if you go to Facebook, just tap on our icon on Facebook or check some of my tweets too. You'll see a lot of what we're about, and please communicate with us as well.
Now, another slide that we have here that's high performance industries. I want to go over these with you. One of the things that you mentioned earlier, we were talking with Ross about the agriculture and livestock part of it. But one thing that you mentioned was cybersecurity. Focus on this little segment here about cybersecurity. What are your thoughts on this? And I don't hear any of the other governor candidates, whether it be Republican or Democrat, none of them are talking about this. So give me your take on this.
Well, sure. On a very personal level, this is quite important to us. Think of Equifax. Think of all the things that have happened with hacking. Think of our elections, what's going on there. But in Kansas, we have cybersecurity firms now that they're doing research, very important work on this. And it's not just in Johnson County. They're scattered across the state in places you wouldn't really think about. And it links in with the military, for sure, in terms of how important the military is to the state and also cybersecurity is to the military. So I think it's huge. It's a huge growth opportunity for Kansas. And I'm going to segue just a little bit here, because if we're going to do well in cybersecurity, we ought to be thinking about how do we train and educate our children early on to be going down that path. I was in a meeting in Kansas City, this meeting about economic development, and one of the gentlemen who's been very successful in business said, "Jim, we should be teaching coding in second grade, and it ought to be fun." Now I heard that. I'm a doctor. I'm thinking, if I see a patient, how do I bill? How do I code? I'm so sorry to admit that. But no, I meant computer coding. And we should be teaching that early on. It should be taught to every child. I was in Junction City talking with Dr. Corbin DeWitt, the superintendent of schools. Their teachers were trying to develop an electronic portfolio for their graduating seniors, and they were having some trouble doing it. And one of the high school seniors in Junction City said, "I'll write an app for it." And he wrote an app for it and sold it for $7 or $8. And Dr. DeWitt said, any student that graduates from a high school ought to be able to write an app.
Yeah.
So that is why it ties in with this enterprising academics.
Yes.
It ties in with education. Economic development and education are married at the hip. It's a marriage. They're joined at the hip. And we have to do better in Kansas with education. We've got to, quit fighting with teachers and get out of court and focus on things that are important and prepare the workforce that we need to grow the state's economy.
Absolutely amazing. Another bullet point on your high performance industries here is logistics and transportation.
Oh, yeah.
You were mentioning earlier the highway fund. I remember late last year, traveling to Kansas City for a Comic-Con, and I noticed that the minute you left Kansas, you didn't see these signs anymore, but the minute you got into Kansas or traveling out of Kansas, there was all these billboards up about don't let the governor rob from the highway fund. Don't let the governor rob from the highway fund. That is just absolutely amazing that that in the state of Kansas, our governor was able to do that and basically get away with it. Give us your take on how you would fix that in logistics and transportation.
Well, we can't grow as a state economically if we don't have good highways, good rail, good air.
Yeah.
And it ties in with everything, including agriculture that you mentioned earlier, just getting products from point A to point B. Or if we're going to grow new products, we have to have a way to transport them from the field to the elevator on. So it's going to be a really long-term project, but we're going to have to restore funding to KDOT. And it's going to take money. And, I have people ask me, how do you distinguish yourself from other candidates? And here's one way I'm going to demonstrate that.
Okay.
The usual mantra for Republican candidates that are running for governor is to say we're going to solve all of our problems with cutting government and cutting taxes.
Yep.
That's not going to work in Kansas. We are going to be sacrificing and paying taxes for years because of this horrible hole that Governor Brownback and Lieutenant Governor Collier got us in with the legislature that has now been replaced, by the way.
Yeah.
But we're going to be paying for that for years. The next governor of Kansas is going to have to restore a functioning government. And we're going to all pay. Money doesn't grow on trees. Kansans know that. We're all going to pay for that. Long term, we're going to be very careful, very thoughtful with how we spend our money, looking in every aspect of government to make sure we're getting the best, for our dollar.
Yeah.
But this is somebody's trying to pull the wool over your eyes if they tell you you're going to cut taxes and solve our problems. And so that is why the next governor's got a real challenge in front of them.
Now, we covered healthcare earlier. IT infrastructure technology, that's another phrase that I never hear any of the other governor candidates talk about. Give us your take on this.
Well, it's important for many reasons, but let's just talk about rural Kansas.
Okay.
Rural Kansas has to have access to broadband, high speed, if they're going to succeed. And that's something that we have to recognize if we want our state to grow. And I want all of Kansas to do well. Here's another important point, too. You don't have to live where you work anymore. Okay? So I have patients that live in Kansas, work for a company on the East Coast whose business is really out on the West Coast, and they're doing it all over the internet. So it's huge for the state that we have IT technology and infrastructure in place, and we've got to push that. And then that becomes one of the beauties of growing Kansas, because this is a beautiful state: clean air, clean water, open spaces, safety. Schools that I think will again be recognized as second to none in the nation once we refund and restore that adequate funding and get beyond fights and get out of court and actually work with teachers and business. So that's why IT technology infrastructure, those are some examples of why I think it's so important.
Now, your other slide that you have here, which I find is very inventive.
Thank you.
It's the HPI task force in the middle, and then you've got the deal springing up from around it. You probably, I would say you and I managed to talk with Lieutenant Governor Collier at the Kansas State Fair when he was there doing Governor's Day at the fair. I still to this day do not understand why I have a Governor's Day at the fair, but that's neither here nor there. One of the things that we talked about was he kept talking about young people and about all the different things. You mentioned young professionals marketing on your graph here. Mm-hmm. Give us your take on that. And
Well, the number one thing they need is a job, okay?
Yes.
They're not going to come if they don't have a job available.
Yeah.
And that's why economic development and all this other conversation we've had over the last close to an hour, whatever it is, that's why it's critical and key. First, they've got to have a job. But we need to look at what do young people, I call them young professionals. You know, millennials is another term. Some people don't like that term, so I call them young professionals. What are they looking for? Well, they're looking for part of a community. They want to be part of a community. They want to be part of something bigger, and they want to feel that they have a purpose in life. Yeah. And so I think we need to strategically look across our state and through our cities at how we make that happen. I know in Salina you're doing that, and I think that's a really cool thing. Out in western Kansas City, that is going to have an extra amount of water from a dairy plant. They want to create a river walk in western Kansas, like San Antonio, and put retail and residential apartments and coffee shops and so forth on it to attract and retain young people.
Young people.
Even Kansas City has struggling. They struggle to attract that too. We have a black eye. We have an image problem. And so that's why I also put marketing on there.
Yes.
We've got to get rid of the black eye. We have to appear as a state who has a leader that will be sensible and work with the legislature. That will work on growing the economy. There are lots of reasons we've come down in the nation's view and probably the international view as well as a state, and we need to fix that black eye for Kansas. We are a great state. I am so proud of Kansas. And I couldn't believe the raving that went on from people that came to the wedding, 17 states, 3 international countries, how much they love Kansas, how much we have to offer. And Kansans have reason to be prideful, but we've gotten knocked back a little bit with the current governor and the past legislature. We can get over that. Yeah. We can turn it around, and I think we will.
Well, I'll have to say, once again, you've sold me on this whole thing, Mr. Barnett. Before we let you go this evening, if people want to get a hold of you online, they want to see a little bit more about what you've been talking about this evening. How do they do that exactly?
Yes, it's our website is barnettforkansas.com, BARNETTFOR, Kansas spelled out.com. And please check us out, our website, but especially go to Facebook, and you'll see all kinds of travel ideas, our policy ideas, the tours we've made already for agriculture and livestock, the tours we've made for Medicaid expansion, healthcare access, supporting and keeping our hospitals open, economic development, and we have another tour coming up next week, and it's on tourism. So we're having a tour on tourism, okay?
Hey, you know, if this governor thing doesn't work out, you can produce all sorts of marketing materials. It's amazing. I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening here on Channel 21 here in Salina, Kansas. SalinaTV.org for more information on Access Television, or if you want to come down and make a program such as this evening, be sure to come down and see Marnie and the rest of the crew. I want to thank our crew this evening and the guy who doesn't get enough credit for putting this show together, our buddy Aaron. And thanks to everybody for joining us, and we will see you next time live from Salina. Also, thanks to Ross Long for being with us on Skype, and have yourself a wonderful evening.